Hey guys out there, Sean Corbett, True West Realty Group here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I've got a guest today, Todd Nunis. We're actually in his building. As a matter of fact, he's got a podcast studio in the building that he owns over here, and part owner, right?
Right.
So he works for Cherry Creek Mortgage, part of Guild.
Yes.
So which gives you a lot of options and flexibility, being able to utilize Guild's benefits, as well as you building your business with Cherry Creek. And what I want to talk about is a couple things today I think will be a real value add for buyers out there, and agents that are working with buyers in this NAR craziness going on. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happened, and I feel like we can add some clarity and have a plan of action for when these things do come up. Probably a good place to start. Todd, you want to introduce yourself or share kind of?
Yeah, I'm Todd Nunis. I've been in the mortgage business for 21 years now, and we've seen the 2008 crisis, and we've seen the lot of changes in the last few years that we're going through here with COVID and all that, and now there's just another change with NAR and all that kind of stuff. So the industry just keeps evolving. But I've been doing this long enough to recognize those changes. So I
think what's important for you in your seat is that a lot of lenders aren't really being very proactive in getting ahead of this. They feel like, well, the agent commission, whether it's paid by the seller or the buyer, that's an issue they've got to deal with. But there's an all-encompassing solution that we can work together and try to get ahead of it, right? Because there's gray area here.
Yeah.
And I have a gut feeling of the way I think it's going to play out, but the reality is being proactive would probably be a lot more beneficial. And I don't know many mortgage companies that are getting ahead of it the way you are.
Yeah.
I think this is a good lesson for everyone.
Yeah. My goal when I sat down and looked at this is say, we understand what's changing, but how do we execute? How do we sit down and go, hey, what's changes with my interaction with the buyer when you send them over to me?
Yeah.
And then also, how do we put them at ease in case something does come up? So we're a big piece of that education, and we've got to do that probably earlier rather than later.
Okay. And part of that comes up where now there are buyers out there that may feel like, well, if they're not getting paid, then why do I need to have them? Could be a way they think about it, right? What is a buyer agent going to do for me in the transaction of things that I couldn't already do with having Zillow and having, seeing solds out there if they think it's sold, or having friends and family that have owned houses. Right. Why do I need a buyer agent? And I think that might be something you can help from your perspective as a lender, right? Not just me as an agent, selling myself. It's you saying, I've done transactions both ways. Right. And I know the reality of the value of what a buyer agent can do in the transaction.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And to me is, I don't do your world, from a contract standpoint and all that. But when you bring me a buyer, I interact in that world. And I sit there and went through and said, there's probably 6 things off the top of my head that I would sit there and go are very important that you guys bring. And so if I was ever asked from a buyer, should I use a buyer's agent? I would probably rattle off those 6 things,
Okay. Well, let's talk about those things. Okay. I think that'd be really valuable.
Yeah.
And it's funny because from the lender standpoint, if you don't have a buyer agent, then you end up kind of filling in a gray space there, and you can't.
Right.
Like, I don't have inspectors. I don't know what a proper repair amendment should look like. I don't know what price to offer.
Right.
I just finance it. Right. I mean, that's that's what we need to partner together.
Everybody stays in their lane. Everything's a little bit easier, right?
And I know from your standpoint, you absolutely would rather have an intermediary in that regard, taking care of the transactional part.
Yeah. The first thing that I would tell them, is if they ask me, do I need a buyer's agent? I say, hey, they've got a vetted network. You've got a lender that you trust. You got a title company that you trust. You got a roofer that you trust. You've got, a window guy that you trust, and so when you put all that together, why would a consumer want to sit there and go, hey, I need to get a new roof, and now I got to go find a roofer? You could call 2 or 3 roofers that you trust and get them there to give a bid and all that good stuff. So that your network is very important and it's already vetted. That's the first thing I would tell them.
Sure. And some of the things you talked about, I mean, a title attorney is something, I don't know what buyer has a title attorney, right? Like, I have several.
Right.
But what buyer has a title attorney? There's a value add in being able to consult someone when you have the situation get a little bit crazy.
Right.
And I have complicated, transactions.
Right.
So having that in my back pocket has been nothing but beneficial for everybody.
Right. Yeah. The second thing is, how do you value a property? What's the proper valuation? They don't have access to MLS. They don't understand how to make the proper adjustment, when you're looking at comparables and stuff like that. Sure. What's an extra half bath worth? What's what's the square footage worth? It's not the price per square foot. It's a different metric. So, the experience that's there is invaluable as well.
Yeah, I have plenty of real world experience with that. How many times do you have a seller that they're 90% chance they're going to overvalue their property? And there's a principle that goes with that and why they do that, but they all inherently think their house is worth far more than it is. And the reality is you have to have some education to say, if you are a buyer, the equivalent buying proposition would show your house is worth this, not what you think it is. And because they've got too much emotional tied around it, and they know all the great things about it, and they don't think about all the negative things about it. They bought it for a reason, right?
Yeah, just a classic example of that would be a pool. A pool, I might spend $60,000 or $100,000 on a pool, but the appraiser is going to give me $25,000.
Nothing else you can do about it. It is what it is. You lost money in your pool. That's why we always try to buy homes with pools if we can. That's your advice.
Yeah.
Free advice. We buy houses with pools. We don't put pools in unless money is not an issue for you.
Right.
And I love the price per square foot illustration. How often do I have conversations, even with buyers or sellers, and their focus is, well, the value of these properties in this subdivision is, $200 price per square foot. And I was like, man, appraisers don't use price per square foot. No one does it. The only person that uses price per square foot is the retail market, because there's no other evaluative tool.
Right.
And they try to make that the equivalent. But extra bedrooms, having large houses have low price per square foot. Small houses have the highest price per square foot. And it all gets skewed in between because they're already maximizing utility. So that's why the smaller houses have the highest price per square foot. And they don't get that unless they've lived it and see it and they understand how appraisal system works.
Right.
So having someone properly evaluate either buying or selling is a critical component. I love that.
Yeah. Then you get into the negotiation piece, and the what's customary that a seller pays and what's customary that a buyer pays, for example, title policy.
Sure.
And then how do you get your offer accepted? If you're in a competitive market, you need to use a buyer's agent because they might have 6 or 7 tools. A larger earnest money piece, waive an inspection, appraisal,
Sure.
There's a lot of things that, tricks of the trade, but they won't know those unless they work with a buyer's agent.
I think the problem is buyers kind of look and operate out of a vacuum in a sense where they have terms that they logically make sense, but they don't know what the protocol is. And you say, what's customary? I like that term in the sense that sometimes the highest price isn't necessarily going to be our winning factor. Right. If I cut every condition, I'll probably go lower on the price, right? I made it a higher risk for my buyer, but the seller's like, I'm going straight to closing, done. And they put up a sizable earnest money as an insurance policy against it. By default, buyers don't know all these terms or know that these affect the way the sellers, process it. And I'll tell you for a fact, if I'm negotiating with a buyer directly or an agent, there's no filter on the buyer.
Right.
They are going to have a really hard time.
Yeah.
Because I know everything and I'm not going to tell them anything.
Right.
So they're really going to struggle working through, someone that's done a lot of these and getting their best opportunity forward without anyone representing them.
Right.
And not to be mean to them, but I mean, you're in our space. Like you can't do this if you don't do this for a living.
Right.
So I can't imagine someone in their own book, their own business model, plugging people from software into accounting and they all just kind of switch back and forth. Like it's just going to move and be smooth.
Right.
They're not talking the same language. Right. So they're going to have conflicts through the whole thing.
It's hard to negotiate when you're vested emotionally in the property too.
I share this, and I don't know if you haven't in this, but I think my number one thing agents offer, the general public is just separating the parties.
Right.
If they don't do that, it's real hard. You're talking about the most money you're ever going to spend in your life on the biggest purchase in your life, and every part of it is expensive.
Right.
So you want negotiation to take place, and you get emotionally, you draw lines, and you start, drawing boundaries and things that we can work around it if we're open-minded and we take off the filter, but they just go straight forward and they can't work through it.
Right.
They clash.
Yeah. The fourth thing is you get past the contract piece and you do the inspection and you got to negotiate repairs, do they ask for everything because they don't know any better? Do they ask for the things that are, critical? How do you know it got fixed correctly? Did you put in your repair amendment that you needed a licensed, plumber to do the work?
Right.
Or is the homeowner doing it themselves? Do they get you receipts? You keep them out of harm's way and they wouldn't even know what harm's way is.
Right.
So
I think the biggest delivery on this one is we need to get buyer to peace of mind, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big separation. And buyers don't always understand that without education,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not going to rebuild a perfect home.
Right.
We're probably not going to get that house to where it never has an item on an inspection report again. Never going to happen.
Right.
Seller's not interested, but will they give some money to help give buyer peace of mind? That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. And experience matters here. A lot of clients that try to do this on their own, when I work with them, they ask for way too much here, so.
Yeah. Because they know that they can't ask later.
Right.
They go too low on the price. They just don't understand the components in order to successfully get them to the finish line. And they get too aggressive with these things.
Right.
It's better to walk in knowing that the house is going to guarantee have repairs, 100%. And if they're maintenance, probably between $3,000 to $5,000 to get them fully up to date.
Right.
Probably not going to happen, but that's going to be a realistic expectation. I'm more concerned about critical components and safety. And we try to focus on those things, and that helps take some of the emotion out of it.
Right.
Let's just be objective about it. And cosmetic and stuff, they think that that's part of negotiating too. That's another component.
Right.
Well, I don't like, they painted it all black. No one's going to buy this house. Well, that can be redone. And I'm sure the price reflects the effect that is black.
Yeah. The next thing, I would say, if they ask, hey, should I use a buyer's agent? I would say, hey, what happens if the appraisal comes in short? Do you have access to the data to sit there and get additional comps to help, go back to the appraiser? Do you know the adjustment? Do you have the experience to do that? And the answer is probably no, So
that's a specialty that they're not going to have direct access to. There's one benefit earlier what you were talking about. We're talking about price per square foot.
Mm-hmm.
You say they don't have access to MLS. What they specifically don't have access to is actual real comp data for homes that have sold. Right. So data that's posted in a lot of these sites aren't really, they have restrictions on how they post the data, or if they can't repost at all. Right. And that's the only information they can really work with. We have the benefit of having real sold data, as well as being able to provide real sold data when we're working with the appraiser to get the appraisal adjusted.
Right.
And I've had success getting appraisals to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you would do it without any experience in this field, because it'd
be really tough.
Really, really hard.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
And you're going to have to pay an agent at some point to get this data for you, because there's no other way to create it.
Correct. Yeah. And then the last thing is, contract requirements. They help you watch. You guys help them watch deadlines. They don't know when their third party is going to be up.
Right.
They don't know when the option period ends. They don't know they've got 2 days to get. I think it's 2 days to get money to title.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't even know the rules that well. That's your world, and they need help watching those deadlines as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably another core benefit of having someone that's done hundreds of contracts versus someone that's never written one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you could probably go to a title company and the seller and the buyer could show up and get them to write something together.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what all those boxes mean and what the impact is going to have unless you spend considerable money through an attorney or something else that's going to make sure you have these protections. So having someone manage your transaction and has a vested interest that you have success is definitely in your benefit for sure.
Sure.
All right. So that was really good. Thank you for covering those 6 items. I think that all buyers can benefit from those things. And there's plenty of other things that are situational or taste. Like for example, I flipped 100 homes. I can give a lot of advice on construction and rehab and what it would do for value. Those are kind of niche things that I can do on top of these 6 things. And these 6 things are core things every agent should be able to deliver on.
Sure.
It's a real important distinction. And then beyond that, they can have their own niche things.
All right.